The thousands of fossils held here at the Natural History Museum don't just tell us about the history of life on Earth, they also hint at the lives of the people who collected them. Mary Anning may now be largely passed by, but in her hometown, her contribution to fossil collecting is very much remembered.
Each year, Lyme Regis is transformed into a carnival of fossils.
Central to this festival is local hero Mary Anning and how she helped transform fossil hunting from a hobby collecting curiosities into a journey of scientific discovery.
By the time she died at the age of 47, Mary Anning was both famous and celebrated as the greatest fossilist the world ever knew. Mary was born in 1799, but at the age of 10, her father died, leaving the family without an income. Mary discovered she could earn money by clambering along the fragile cliffs to find fossils and sell them to passers-by. It was a poor existence that would eventually challenge one of the most fundamental beliefs of the time.
Back then, people believed the Old Testament story that the earth was created in 6 days and that it was only 6,000 years old.
Mary and her fossils would help change all that. She happened to be in just the right place, living on what's known as the Jurassic Coast. This is a 155-kilometre stretch of rugged, treacherous cliffs from Dorset to Devon. Martin Munt from the Natural History Museum is going to show me why these rocks became a life's work for Mary.
This is really spectacular, and I can't believe the amount of fossils I'm looking at here.
What it is just a natural accumulation of these fossils over a long period of time. So you've got lots of different ammonites living in the waters above, dying, and ending up on the seafloor.
We now know that an ammonite is a spiral-shelled relative of a modern squid, the most common Jurassic fossil on the Lyme Regis coast.
Can you paint me a picture of what the seas would have been like during that time?
Okay, right. The sea may have been fairly warm. We were close to the equator at the time. I think if you just look around you, you've got all these ammonites, it must have been swarming with ammonites.
Sure.
But at the age of 12, Mary Anning discovered something out of the ordinary, and her fortunes began to change.
One day in 1811, Mary's brother found a skull protruding from the cliff, and it took her months to painstakingly uncover the rest of the bones. She discovered the first complete skeleton of a fish lizard, or ichthyosaur.
The ichthyosaur was sold for the small fortune of £23, and with collectors, museums, and even European noblemen vying to buy further discoveries, Mary dedicated her time to combing the cliffs, eventually finding other species unknown to science. Mary Anning and her dog became a familiar sight along these beaches. Visitors began pouring into Lyme Regis, and 200 years later, they still come to head out across the rocks and try their luck at fossil hunting.
And what we're seeing here is the tooth, perhaps, of quite a large shark, a sort of 3-metre beast that was hunting around looking for fish to eat. This is a fish-eating tooth. So come from the Cretaceous rocks, so this is probably going to be about 105 million years old. It may have come from the Gault clay or the upper greensand that's overlying these rocks. So that's a really interesting find, and one that's taken me a bit by surprise. So well done.
Thank you. Well done.
There you go. Keep it safe.
So do you think it would have been easy for Mary to find fossils along this coastline back in the early 1800s?
OK, yeah, I think it would have been fairly easy because there would have been more fossils about, because there's less collectors. What would have been the difficulty, of course, is the interpretation and understanding what they were.
But while to visitors the fossils were confusing and mysterious, Mary Anning had taught herself to recognise and understand what she was finding. And in the years to follow, the scientific community would rewrite the history of the world based in no small part on the findings of Mary Anning.
But all this was really troubling to the Victorian mindset because fossils undermined faith in the Bible and the story of creation. They seemed to show that life had evolved slowly over a really long time. It all pointed to a world that was much, much older than 6,000 years.
In her final months, though women were not allowed to join the esteemed Geological Society, Mary Anning was nevertheless made an honorary member. Today, she's recognised as the first female paleontologist and one of the people who provided evidence that changed our thinking on the age of the planet and the story of life on Earth.